All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the 2 Plus podcast. Today we're going to do some list review work again. The Capital City Bloodbath was a tournament held in Canada that's just finished up. I think it's about 50 players or so. And as usual, dragons have dominated the top of the table. And specifically in this case, lists with 2 dragons have dominated the top of the table, in particular, first and second place, which were both taken out by Tomb Kings players. One of them is a familiar list to this channel, we'll get to later, but the tournament winner was Phil Carl, who won 5 games. Sorry, no, won 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Won these first 5, drew his last one, 10 all. But his list has a Higher Priest, level 4, on a Bone Dragon, with the Warding Splint, Serpent Staff, and the Potion of Speed. And then he also has a Tomb King on a Bone Dragon, who's the general with the Armor of Ages, Potion of Toughness, and the Talisman of Protection. He has 3 Sepulchral Stalkers in core with 10 Skeleton Archers, and then 6 Skeleton Chariots. And then in special, he has 2 Tomb Scorpions and 2 Necrosphinx in rare. So all up, I think when we did this list, there was about 23 models or something in this list, which is pretty filthy. The list that came second, as I said, was also a Tomb Kings list. He went 5 and 1 loss, 5 wins, 1 loss. He similarly, Nicholas Shalona, I'm going to say, is his last name. He has a level 4 on a Bone Dragon, Talisman of Protection, the Law Familiar, Serpent Staff, and Illusion. And then he has another level 4 on a Bone Dragon with the Warding Splint, Earthing Rod, running Necromancy. Both, and the other one was Illusion. I won't go through the other list, the whole list of it, because really this comes down to 2 dragons dominating. Alex, particularly that first list, is pretty familiar to this channel. What was recognizable from it, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much the same list, isn't it? So for all those people who've been here from the beginning, there was a really short, I think, Paddy, it might be our least watched video of all time.
Yeah.
Still, looking at the Team Kings list because it came out of the Square-based online tournament, or SBOT, as we'll call it, that in that event, Phil had scored the most kill points overall, or the most tournament points, actually. Sorry, I should say, even though I'm not sure if counting the final, Denarius, the guy who won with Wood Elves, ended up on top. But at the time we were looking at those lists, we were just looking at the rounds, and Phil had smashed everybody. And looking back, he'd only lost to the guy who won. Ultimately, he had 3 victories. And we looked at that list just as a precursor to this whole thing about dragons, because we were sort of like, oh my God, it's got 2 dragons. And then for what some people think, necrosphinxes are like mini dragons. So I don't think it's different at all. I think it might be exactly the same when I sort
I
of
think
tried
it's
to.
exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting in itself that there wasn't much of an evolution. Maybe there didn't need to be. Why would there need to be up until this point? So I think this story, I mean, we just talked about dragons with the Warriors of Chaos book coming out and how many is too many, but it feels like there's not enough for some people at the moment.
I think, yeah, interestingly, with both of those lists that have performed really well here, neither of these dragon riders are geared offensively. The Bone Dragon itself is a little weaker than your Star Dragon or your Chaos Lord Dragon. So maybe it leans itself that way regardless. But both of these guys have level 4s with Illusion, who Illusion is like the control law. You're trying to stop other dragons with Illusion predominantly. And then the guy who came second was running another level 4, and Phil, who came first, had a Tomb King on it, but not one that's meant to put out heaps of damage by the looks of things, which kind of speaks into the strategy behind it, where some people think the power of the dragon is to just sweep through enemy armies, to be fair. Like, it has the power to do that, but maybe the real power in them is just that control element is you're not going to get this 920 points from me from my two dragons, and
Hmm.
I can ward off whatever I need to protect, areas of the battlefield, while my two Tomb Scorpions and Necrosphinxes can pressure your dragons. So yeah, yes, it is like dragons are pretty disgusting when you've got two of them, but like there is at least strategic play behind it. Not by any means justifying two dragons, but it is at least like I don't know how well I would play two dragons. I'm sure it
Yeah, look,
it,
I
it
think
looks
it's
easy.
that's well, I think it's the case because you're hearing different things. So, look, I wanted to go like there's a few things to go off on, and one of them is that we've referenced the Dwellers Below podcast where they had players with dragons doing well in another tournament that had no comp restrictions on what people could bring and was like a celebrated competitive environment. And there were a lot of insights in that podcast about how to actually use dragons, which is something that we care about on this channel about how to play well and tricks about how to make sure you never get charged and when to charge. Like we've talked a lot about first turn being a big advantage, but if you've got a dragon, the last turn is a big advantage because you get that charge without, if they flee from that charge, they're going to be fleeing at the end of the game, which is one of the tactics that I've faced ridden monsters and found them infuriating when they can flee, rally, march, get away with high leadership scores. I think that's part of it, that they're probably defensive. There's been on top of that, a lot of people talking about the ogre blade and needing to go at the dragons, which I applaud. I want to go after them and have a go and not just be playing cagely all the time. But I didn't see that as the optimal play. Like if you're coming across with your dragon, you're taking a risk. And I think that if you're able to play defensively in some ways, so and you have other ways of pressuring, then they have to come to you and you get the charge on your turn, which it might be a combo charge. It might be just in a way where you decide by movement after someone makes a commitment, you can then skirt around that and sort of force the game on your terms by just sort of being the person who reacts rather than makes that first move.
Yeah, I mean, talking about strategies of dragons, I mean, one of the main strategies every player who comes to tournaments like this is how to deal with the dragon. That is something every player has to face. One other list that did quite well, Jason Sparks, who was undefeated, also came third as Empire. Obviously doesn't have a dragon, doesn't have the Empire on Imperial Griffin either. He has a Wizard Lord on a Pegasus, Lore Familiar, Ruby Ring, Battle Magic, an Engineer. So that is only 295 points of characters.
Mike,
Like
Mike, you got
that's
to
it's
go down
yeah, Mike lives. In core, he's got
15%.
in core, he's got 10 Empire Knights, full command, drilled. And then he has two more smaller units of 5 Empire Knights. That's his core, 502 points. They both had a champion and musician. Then he has 2 units of 4 Demigryph Knights, one with the Silver Horn, both with a champion and standard bearer. And then he has 3 Great Cannons and a steam tank. So like great cannons in our experience have been fantastic, obviously against
Fantastic.
monsters. They basically always hit. Let's be
Yeah.
real. When you've got an engineer, to re-roll that misfire is a massive deal. But what's interesting about this list is it's not just a straight gun line. Like Empire Knights are incredible value in our experience. That's what we've found as well. And Demigryph Knights also fantastic. I think 4 is a bit hard to maneuver, but this guy's probably a much better player than me. This list seems balanced, and he's obviously beaten some dragons because a lot of this tournament lists had dragons in it, and he came third and undefeated. So, there's hope for those Empire players out there, Al.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think the gun line idea has a negative connotation and appreciate that, yeah, it's the cannons. It's not the guns, it's the cannons. That is what it's about. They're extraordinarily reliable. And we've had a lot of them on this channel so far, which is good. I think it's good to see. I really like these little finesse moves with champion and musician or champion and standard bearer, and that's something I'm sure we'll get onto later. because I think you can save a lot of points, and it's the hallmark of a really like well optimized list to shave those sort of 7 points and tried to get them elsewhere, especially 15% characters. So just got that blaster mage and the engineer providing the redundancy of the one early misfire, I suppose. But yeah, I hope it goes well. Like I think that something's got to go after these things. I don't know if there are the tools in the metagame. I think people just have to understand that this is what it is at the moment. And that if you're going to try to comp them out of tournaments, you might be risking just creating another type of dragon. Like at this point, I think hopefully the game, it's probably a way off a revision, but there might be simpler or more elegant solutions to what's going on. But I'm not sure if you turn up like two dragons is probably going to be something with the Warriors book, the Tomb King's book that you're going to have to just be ready for. You can't, one dragon might have been annoying to you, but if you're going to try to win the thing, you're going to have to be worried about two dragons at some level.
But it's three now, isn't it? You can have Chaos Lord
Yeah,
Orc, sorry, Chaos Sorcerer on Dragon. You can have Galrosh, and you can have the Warpfire Dragon in a 2K
yeah, I think
list.
Garrock seems manageable, but I wonder if there are configurations. Like is Warp Fire Dragon 0 to 1, or is it just like if you
I'll
get to
check.
2000, 2250, can you play two of them, for example?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
I mean,
yeah,
who knows where this is going to
yeah,
end?
let's not fantasize about four dragon lists.
Well, I think
Please.
it's just extraordinary that I don't know, was it a week ago when we were talking about dragons or 2 weeks ago? It was just this pipe dream and we were joking about it, but you've got both players at the top with two, and who knows who else was out there, And that's the Tomb King thing. I think the newness, sadly, Games Workshop's model has always been to release these books where they're more powerful. And we were really lucky this time that everyone got their rules straight away. But I think a lot of us felt like there was power lurking in the Bretonian and Tomb King's book that might not have existed elsewhere. And that, yeah, they're just these bone dragons, they're pretty cheap. They provide this tankiness, which I think if you're just starting out on this sort of stuff, is that it's more of a defensive piece than an offensive one. It's not about like swinging across and smashing any unit you can find. I think it's more about you can't get these points off me. I'm really defensive, and when the time comes, I'll join a combat and I'll most likely win with something else, or I'll pick on something really small.
Yeah, I think the Bone Dragon is like disgustingly cheap. You can get that's
Yeah.
195 points, and it stacks up. All right, it's definitely not your Star Dragon. Weapon skill 4, strength 6, not strength 7. It'll give your Tomb King toughness 6, 9 wounds still though. It only has 5 attacks, but it does have the D6 stomps. So like it's like your entry level dragon that's not impetuous. Sorry, Sun Dragon. But like one of these things on the table, and you're not feeling too bitter about it, but it's very easy to get two of them on the table, and it's very easy to gear Tomb King characters defensively, I think, which is what Tomb Kings is going to end up being long term. Double Dragon is the way to go to win tournaments. And I think if you're going to a serious tournament, you'd most likely see multiple Tomb King lists with double dragons and double necros and probably double
Tomb
Tomb
Scorpion.
Scorpions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you can get two Star Dragons, but you're just giving up so much else aware. Like, I guess the feeling with high elves is that you're trying to play sisters as much as possible, and you need the handmaiden as your general. So that's going to cost you 90 points, or at least 65 or something without the Hornavisher. But two Star Dragons is going to cost you about 895 points, I think, for a level
Yeah.
4 and a
A
Prince.
naked, yeah. Yeah. And a naked prince on a dragon, a star dragon is 420. So
Yeah,
yeah, you'd be looking at 850, 900 geared up.
yeah, and that's what you need. And the high elves do have some of that stuff, like cheap wards, regen, but I don't think the backup in the other 1,000 points is really there. Like you're going to end up, it might not matter, but I think the Tomb King's getting necrosphinxes in there otherwise is just like, my God, like there's so much monster slaying. There's so many things that are huge. As someone with Lizardman who's had a lot of like large things going around, the Stegodon, for example, just benefits from the Carnosaur because the biggest, that's the target, or the Slan gets the attention, and so the Stegodon gets away with a little bit more. So you can imagine here that you could just throw out a Necrosphinx and it might absorb some of the things that are there to take down the dragon or vice versa, and you still got a lot of power outside of that. So I think it's just good to go back to that, not so much the videos, because I would have liked to have done more on Esport, but if you're really looking at this game from a competitive point of view and you're trying to win, that was really, I would really like advise you to go back and look at just the lists that were released. You can go to Reddit. I think Van Heffelfinger's post about look, I just search the
It's all on
Esport
new
Online
recruit.
tournament. Yeah, and it's on New Recruit, and you can go through like every game and every list if you really wanted to. And you'll just see like the nature of that environment being abstract, the type of guy that was willing to play, or girl, an online tournament, a finicky online tournament for that long must be a really serious Warhammer player in lots of ways. Like I think we're pretty serious, and I draw a line at playing online just for my own sanity. But I think that if you go back to those lists, I still reference them all the time when I'm trying to find out how an Orc and Goblin list is put together, or Warriors, or even just the funky Demon list that you brought up. The beginnings of those were in those Espot lists where they'd come out of the gates and won their first two rounds, and the sort of Bloodthirster plus Exalted Flamer list were in there. So I think it's worth going back to and revisiting that Tomb Kings had done well. You might find some things that are more powerful because I think it was only Dark Elves in the end that didn't get a run in that tournament. And we've seen
Was,
since then
yeah.
that they're probably a lot better than everyone thought there as well. They get a dragon, at least.
Yeah, quite a good one with the 4+ forward save. So they've got a chance, that's
That's
for
right.
sure.
That's right.
Interestingly, the S-Bot, excuse me, the guy that came second running Orcs and Goblins, you don't see them, like you see them towards the top of the tournaments, but you don't often see them winning. But
Mm.
he managed to go far, obviously, to the final and was pretty close to winning it, to be honest. So we've spoken before about I would love to see a bit more of a game analysis from that tournament because the spread of armies in that tournament was so vast, and the top had Bretonia, Wood Elves, High Elves, Orcs and Goblins, Vampire Councils up there. So like it just
Just
showed
had
the
a dragon.
viability of, yeah, showed the viability of the array of armies, I thought, because it's so easy to get stuck into. I remember after that tournament, everyone was like, Wood Elves are broken, pillars are just, it's the end
Yeah.
of the old world. But this list was in it, and it lost to the Wood Elves that tournament, but then wiped this one pretty much. So I don't know. It shows some pretty positive things, I think, for the array of armies that can do well, even if their thing that works seems broken. A lot of armies seem to have this powerful thing, at least. So it's not like you can only play Tomb Kings to win a tournament, which I think is
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, like as you say, the high elf player ended up coming third, and another high elf player was in the top 10, and they had dragons and other things, but there's certainly templates there, like the whole big thing plus support, whether that's missiles or whether it's something like Necrosphinxes, is the template at the moment. And I mean that's not such a bad thing in many ways. Like it's just a case like every format is going to be distorted in some way, and we haven't really gotten to the bottom. We'll probably do a video about it with some signs of life with infantry about what's going on there. That like, there's something about the game structurally that makes them not as good. But you hear I didn't play eighth edition, but you hear that infantry was really great in eighth edition, and so something is going on. I think that the game's still really enjoyable. As we say, like you probably how many people are going to go 5-0? If you've gone 4-1, that's an incredibly successful day. Or this was a 6-round tournament. If you've gone 4-2, you've done really well, and you've probably played lots
Yeah.
of different stuff in the middle. So yeah, I don't want to stress too much like people having a bad time. I think it'd be nice to see some more ways of dealing with these things, and I'm beginning to think they might not really exist. But that's only if you want to go to a weekend away where your plan is to win the whole tournament. And I have a suspicion he probably intentionally drew that last game. If you were
Yes.
5-0, it's just an
You
old
just don't want
gamer
to go.
trick.
You just don't want
Yeah,
to go 20. You don't want
say
to
to
go
the
zero
guy, do
20.
you want to draw? Or maybe
Yeah.
offer him something or her something to split so you don't have to play, your next high stakes pressure game on a Sunday night or something, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So who knows if he was
What
really like,
it,
sorry.
oh, good. I was just going to say, what do you think is next with this? We've seen an array of lists, as I mentioned before. Wood Elves took taking out the Espot last week or 2 weeks ago. We did the Bretonian Exiles list, which was apparently broken in OP. Never allowed to play that again. But like
Yeah.
that was a different scene, bringing up, a huge comp on that tournament. You've said that you don't think new ways of dealing with double dragon is going to pop up. Like, I know it's still early days, but everyone's kind of the internet has allowed everyone to power read Warhammer the Old World and figure out how to deal with it early. What do you think makes this game, and not to get too deep, but like playable at a semi-tournament level where these sort of lists aren't turning up at your local 2000 point 1 day event, or is that just
Mm.
totally fine?
Yeah, I think it probably is totally fine. I think that, like, my experience, I'm playing a lot, which is better than I thought, probably once a week. And I'll play a tournament like you will on November 9th, and we'll probably play like a mini tournament on October 19th. And still, we're not in any 2 day events. We're not really playing 2250. We're still playing, and I've got a truckload of models, but I still couldn't just turn up with a double drag. Oh, I could actually turn a double dragon list, but
You
I'd
sure
have to paint it.
can.
Yeah, I'd have to paint it and that sort of thing. And I don't know if you're just going to see it. I think that it's a different type of game. Like, there's so much investment in the background that I would be disappointed if I turned up and had one game like this. But you're probably gonna only have one game like that because you'll get
Yeah,
flogged, or you're competitive in that sort of environment, and they're the games you want to play all the way through. Where, if you're turning up with two pieces as significant as a dragon or two level fours, you're probably going to do pretty well. And you're going to enter that. And it's made me think, as someone who wants to organize tournaments down the track, just I get my feet under myself, and other people are doing such a great job in Sydney at the moment, that you do need to sort of cater to what the game is about a little bit too, that there's a big investment, that you're playing a 3 hour game, like you don't want it to be over in 15 minutes. And how do you then change just this straight, like you're playing rules as written and winner takes all games? I just don't think you can do that. And there's got to be other ways forward. I think the rules have to be as widely understood as possible. So I'm very cautious about changing rules or having like like elbow length comp things like the Nova list. I thought that was just completely ridiculous and over the top. But I do think like maybe there are ways to sort of shape things. And I remember on the Old World Fanatics podcast, they spoke to a guy in Perth. I thought he had some great ideas about just incentivizing other types of behavior. Like, do the guy who wins all the tournament points, is he really the champion of the event? Or how people often do combined scores for sports and paint and generalship, stuff like that. That used to be very common. So I don't know. Like, I'm hoping that's what happens. I feel like we're probably entering, if you're looking at, because I've played a lot of different games competitively, that you do get into an abstract metagame where these are the control decks or builds, and the things that usually beat those are combo type things like scream lists or stuff that is not so great about against your average jank, but goes up, like can take down like the leadership of one of these guys, like with screaming or something like that, that doesn't really deal with infantry so well. I hope they're built into the format. I'm not sure that they are, but I think people are really into the game and will look for other ways to play, and that mostly around the world they are probably just playing other ways, and that these tournaments are a great way to talk about things, but whether they're the way the majority of people play is probably not the truth.
yeah, I think that's kind of important. Our experience so far has been overwhelmingly positive with this game. There's definitely flaws with it, but every time I've played, I've had a fantastic time. I've brought a dragon a couple times. I haven't other times. It's not like our local casual scene is dominated by dragons, but nor do I really think it will be. It's just how it is. But if yours is, it's probably fine as well because you probably have a dragon yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I think holistically the game's really good. Infantry does kind of suck, but
Mm.
if you both have infantry, it's all right.
Well, I had a
So
great game. Last two games I played have been 2,000 point games with a fair bit of infantry, and they have been more fun because there's a lot of dice rolling and a
yeah,
lot of missing. And you're like, oh, I hope this champion can hit and then wound and then get through a save. And you can tell from that statement, it doesn't happen more than half the time. So that's sort of one side of it. I think the other side, I heard something great. I remember someone preparing for the Games Workshop event, which only has supported armies, Games Workshop models. And surprisingly, we didn't see a lot of media come out afterwards about it. But they were just saying, well, I know the Bretonnian Duke will be out there. The Orcs and Goblins players will have Fanatics. There'll be double High Elf Dragon list. And it's just, look, that they all, and it's still probably got 80 people, and they had a great time. And there seem to be pockets around the world where those metagames exist. And we're seeing a lot of that online. But there are also like the extraordinary luck, I think we found myself and us in Western Sydney, where there just wasn't that type of dynamic. People were still having a good time, and it didn't feel fragile when the tournament was on. It's just people were like interested in other things. They're happy to come and go 2-1 and maybe lose to some big thing, but then on the other ways, they got to play there's a lot of prints and there's a lot of edge case models in there, like the High Beastmaster and Manticore that won the tournament. So
yeah. And yeah, I think it's important to kind of focus, not focus, but remember that it's in a pretty good state. I I didn't play 6, didn't play 8, but there was no Warhammer for 10 years. Now there is, and it's pretty bloody fun to play. So we might leave it there. That's come up to half an hour, but kudos to you for spotting this list back in spot round 1, I think
yeah,
it was.
well,
No,
kudos to
round
Phil.
3.
Like he's
Yeah,
kept
kudos to
going
Phil.
with it, like he's
Yeah.
winning, and this time took home all the flowers, all the jewels. I don't know what they give you.
Chocolates? Yeah, I don't
Chocolates.
know. Chocolates. I'm sure he got some chocolates. Anyway, thanks, Al. And
All
thank you
right.
everyone for watching. If you're interested in more, let us know what you're interested to see. But yeah, leave us a comment, like, subscribe, whatever you can below. We love doing it. So thanks. See ya.
Bye.